Welcome, everyone, to the last installment of our Technology in Context series by the Cofrin School of Business at UWGB and Advancing Digital. My name is Oliver Buechse. I am the Executive in Residence for Digital Transformation at the Cofrin School of Business and also the CEO of my little business, Advancing Digital. Over the past weeks, we have talked about foundational technologies to give you a good understanding of those different technologies and how they function. And then we have worked our way through these really contextual issues: racial bias, democracy, environmental issues, the future of learning. And today we're going to talk about the future of relationships. And as always, I have four angles here. The first one I want to look at is our view of ourselves, right? The relationship with yourself is an important one. You need to learn to love yourself before you can love others. We talk about mental health a lot, where people basically are struggling with the view they have of themselves. So we'll take a look at a few perspectives, how technology influenced that. Then we'll talk about family dynamics. That could be a 10-hour presentation in its own right, but I'm going to look at the role of us as parents and of us as children. Then we'll go into social connectivity and love. And finally, if we have time and dare to touch that subject, I'm going to talk about AI and spirituality. All right, so here's a question to all of you. If you had to answer this as a multiple choice, who in this world knows you best? Answer number one, nobody knows me better than I know myself. Answer number two, my mom for sure. Number three, after all these years, I have to say my partner. Or answer number four, Google, right? Anybody want to answer that from your perspective?
Google.
Google. Right? At least Google might know things and might have analyzed things about us that we don't know, right? I always like to know that I haven't shared everything about me with the world or with Google, but then again, maybe I'm not paying attention. So if you are curious to find out what Google actually knows about you, you can pursue different links. I have the source at the bottom here, so you could find out what Google thinks about you. But let me warn you, all you get to see is really the data layer, right? That's just part of the truth. Google also has your location history, your search history, your YouTube search history, and so forth and so forth. So lots and lots of things that they are storing. What Google will not let you see are the analytics that they run over that data, the so-called meta information, right? So if Google has created a psychological profile about you, they don't have to show you that. The law only says they have to reveal the data that they've collected about you. And so when Google is selling your information to advertisers, these advertisers usually specify very clearly what they want, not only by age group, but sort of the, marketers are starting to talk into these psychological profiles. And so there is a lot more to this, but if you're interested, at least at the surface level, to see how much information Google has about you, you can start to dig in. Now, we can complain about that Google is collecting all that information about us, but the truth is most of that information was provided by ourselves. We wanted to use a search engine. We wanted to expand our knowledge. We wanted to get safely from point A to point B, so we used Google Maps. And we had read, presumably, the user agreement, all the 25 pages of it, and had signed off on that. So we were fully knowledgeable about what we were doing, correct? And so much of the data that is out there in the world has been provided by us. And one of the reasons that more and more people are sharing data about themselves is because they want to solicit a reaction. We share pictures of our family on Facebook because, even the family in Germany or in the Caribbean can then see our kids or the new kitten or something like that. And people are eager to then see, how many likes have I received and what comments have I received. And for many, that has become a very important source of social connectivity, of affirmation. For young people in particular, it sort of has become this popularity game. How many followers do I have? How many likes do I have? How many groups? How many TikTok videos? And how many people have viewed my TikTok videos? Every day there's a new person rising to viral fame, whether it's the dancing grandmother or the screaming kitten. Something new pops up and becomes a world sensation. Oftentimes that goes along with financial benefits. There is, of course, a downside to that. What if you're not one of the famous or popular people? Or what if the gang turns on you? What if online bullying, cyberbullying, shaming happens? And it's not like in the old days, where you got maybe laughed at in the school bus. Now, a much, much larger audience participates in that. And it could be hundreds and thousands of ridiculing comments, and that has driven some people into very, very desperate acts. But let's be honest, it's not just the young people. In the professional world, on LinkedIn, we have the same vanity contest going on. People posting every day. And I always laugh when I see the posts that say, I am so humbled to receive this acknowledgement. Yeah, if you were so humble, you wouldn't have posted it yourself. Let's be honest here, right? So how many views did you get on LinkedIn? Who has viewed you? You can pay to get all that information and so forth. So this is not a topic that is isolated to young people or influencers. I think all of us like to get a pat on the shoulder. All of us like to hear, well done. And social media is the ultimate amplifier for that. Now, here are some of the problems. Because there's so much pressure, reality is oftentimes no longer good enough. People, even beautiful people, feel they have to Photoshop pictures of themselves, or maybe it's not even themselves. Maybe it's the producer of an article or of a magazine that actually Photoshops the pictures to create a more surreal vision of beauty. And that then creates pressure on others who then may say, oh, I want to look like that, even though it's not even possible to look like that because nobody has eyes that big. People undergo plastic surgery to look like someone else, like a famous person, or they feel left behind, never able to achieve the beauty standards or the ideals that are being portrayed out there, which of course are not real. Now, technology could also help in a more realistic way. Augmented reality beauty mirrors, for example, you can look into them and they can show you what your style would look like with a certain makeup, or you can choose between different styles. And then the mirrors will basically walk you through step by step how you can achieve that look. And it's a look modeled based on your own face. So they're not showing you, some famous celebrity, but they're basically using your own contours, your face, and overlaying it with realistic makeup choices to say, here, you want to look like this, you want to look like this. Now let's get you there step by step. Or if it's not about makeup, it could be clothing. If we could see ourselves in an extreme makeover, a different style, different hairstyles, different dresses, different colors, and there are, again, augmented reality mirrors that allow you to see yourself in an augmented way. And then you can choose the dresses, the outfits, the combinations that you like best. So there can also be positive things, technology in support of creating maybe the best version of yourself. Now we're still in reality. What if we wanted to escape reality, right? So we'll go into virtual reality. Augmented reality is overlaying computer-generated information over the real world, but virtual reality is taking you away into an artificial world. And in some cases, this could be mundane as a shopping experience to select your snacks, like this GoPuff By the way, these guys are hiring in Green Bay, in Appleton, in Oshkosh, so they are definitely expanding into our region here. But it could also be more. Virtual reality could take you away into the world of Avatar, into a sensational, wonderful fantasy world. And because it is so immersive and it stimulates the brain so intensely, there could be sort of an almost addictive component that goes along with that. Here are some of the downsides of virtual reality, right? In VR, in some of the interactive games, you could create an avatar that looks like maybe the way you want to be. If you remember the movie Avatar, right, the soldier who had been paralyzed was able to slip into the body of one of the aliens. Well, in any game, you could become a superhero, choose what character you want to represent, and then experience that world through the eyes of that character, but also be perceived in that world as that character, right? What a great way of becoming someone entirely different who you are not. The downside of that is if everybody can be what they want to be, if everybody can pretend to be somebody else, how can we still trust in what we see, in what we hear? How can any of that translate into real life? One of the issues they are already seeing in Japan as people are sort of jumping onto that technology movement and becoming better versions of themselves is that human relationships, real relationships, are being swapped out for technological ones. And we'll talk about the robotic lover when we get to the romance section here. So the view of ourselves is influenced by technology because we are putting more data about ourselves out there. And we can create new versions of ourselves, technology supported, for good and for not so good. Let's take a look at what that means for family dynamics. And I'm going to start with us as children, so talking about our parents. The key premise is that technology creates a new quality of aging and what we can do with or for our parents to allow them to live their best lives. So I'm going to look at the positive side here. The facts are that people are getting older and older. Already since the 1960s, the average life expectancy has gone up. It is projected to continue to rise. And of course, this is the average, right? This still includes people who have died at a young age. So some research says that the first person to live to 150 has already been born. So one baby in this world is going to live for 150 years. But now think about that. If we continue to have children, say on average, between ages 30 and 40, then we're going to have 70-year-olds taking care of their 100-year-old parents, right? And there are obviously financial limitations. There are physical limitations on what you can do at such a high age. So one concept that's going to be really important is mobility, because typically old age goes along with reduced mobility. You can't drive anymore, or if you drive, it's kind of dangerous. You also don't want to take longer trips anymore. But if we get to autonomous driving, it's really different. You could really get into the car at any age, select your destination, take me home, take me to my daughter, take me to my friend, and let the car do the rest for the most part, depending on what level of autonomous driving we're talking about, or at a minimum in the supported driving modes, significantly reduce the risks because the car would recognize dangers and avoid collisions. So mobility goes up. That's a first big asset. The second is that in-home mobility, micromobility, can go up as well. With physical limitations, you may currently be confined to a wheelchair, to a bed, to your house, or to a nursing home. And if there's not anybody around who can lift you up and put you in the wheelchair and push that wheelchair outside, my mom was in a wheelchair and we even had to get her down the stairs, which was extremely difficult. if there's nobody around, you're just stuck. And so now robots come into play, care robots that are strong enough and under the guidance of a person can lift someone, can take them out of bed or put them in bed very carefully. And so now you can see how a 70-year-old could take care of a 100-year-old parent with the help of such a robot. And these robots are going to fulfill different functions. You have seen this slide many times if you followed my presentations. Social engagement, mental engagement, physical support through robots who have language capabilities, who can learn everything about you, who can download your Facebook history, know all of your friends, track what all of your friends are doing, initiate dialogue with your family or with your friends, engage you in games, listen to the same story that you're telling for the 100th time, engage you mentally to prevent the onset of Alzheimer's, right? So these robot companions are going to play a very, very important role. And you've heard me say this before, they are going to become part of our family. We have just gotten a little kitten a few weeks ago. Already our family dynamics have completely changed. If our boys can become as loving to each other as they are loving to that kitten, oh my goodness, this was the best addition to the family we've ever had. My dad on the other side, they just lost a dog that they've had for 12 years, and they are in deep, deep mourning, right? One of the benefits of these robots is they don't die. You know, batteries can be replaced, microchips can be upgraded, and all the memories these things have collected about a loved one could actually be passed on to the next generation. There could be, you know, hours and hours and hours of video that this little thing has captured about grandma, all the stories she's ever told in her own voice that could be recorded for perpetuity and become a treasured family memory. Micromobility also includes the ability to live independently, surveillance systems, sensors in the home, sensors on the person, cameras that sort of roam the house and check on where grandma is and how she's doing, or the smart home that recognizes what's going on in the home and can alert if something bad has happened. Those are all features that will make independent living, prolonged independent living, a reality where we don't have to get into a nursing home as soon as maybe today. And, you know, sometimes there's the prejudice out there that older people don't really want this, but that's not true. The tech adoption among seniors is rising very quickly. They've been the fastest growing adopters of some of these social media platforms because it helps them overcome social isolation. So this is not something you're doing to poor grandpa and grandma. In most cases, they are embracing it because it has huge benefits to their social connectivity and the quality of life that they experience. So these, I mentioned social media platforms, right? Whether it's Portal, where you basically have a standing visual connection to your family, no matter how far they are away, Facebook for seniors, dating sites for seniors, or game apps where seniors can play with each other or with the computer or with an entire community. It's all forms of connectivity and social engagement. I remember my grandma in the 70s, you know, at an old age, her pastime was to sit at the window and watch the cars drive by. There was just nothing else to do. And every now and then somebody would come visit, and that was the highlight of her week. You know, now, you know, she could be connected to all of her friends that she couldn't go see anymore in a completely different way. This is a really interesting one, life stories and life cycle analytics. You know, already many of us are putting photos and little stories and little updates out on Facebook, but there's going to be technology platforms that chronicle our lives in a much more detailed way. And that could be a benefit for ourselves. It could be a benefit for those we leave behind. It could be used to stimulate our memory and our processing capacity in old age, especially if we are at risk of dementia or Alzheimer's or other things. Seeing visual cues from earlier in our life could help prevent some of that. So there's going to be platforms that in a much more systematic way capture and collect all that visual information. I would assume that you don't even have to type anything. You just tell the journal what happened that day. It will have voice recognition, it will record it, it will translate it into text. And then there are life cycle analytics through which we can identify patterns. This is going back to who knows you best. You can learn a lot about yourself if you journal, and if you can reread your journal. Now imagine you actually have the ability to sort of analyze what's happening in your journal. Of course, the analytics were not developed for your own benefit only. These companies want to draw insights from that, and I'm sure they have people buying that information from them. So if you have parents, if you have aging parents, here's my recommendation to you. Number one, grow your own understanding of these senior technology options. If your parents are not yet on board with them, maybe it's time to introduce them to that, or even learn about them for your own usage in retirement, pre-retirement, and old age. Work on creating that technology affinity by using technology meaningfully together. Just giving grandma a PC for her birthday, that doesn't do it. But a portal for Christmas, and then the continuous connection through portal, that's completely differently. That is what truly creates technology affinity. And very important here is to have a discussion about data, transparency, privacy. What are the wishes? For example, all of the information that was collected on Facebook or in one of these journals or through one of these robot companions, what do they wish to happen to that data? Should it die with them someday and remain private? Should it be shared with the family? Who should get access to it? These are some important decisions that we don't really talk about today, because all of that information just lives in our mind, and so naturally it goes away with our passing. Let's go to the other side of the equation, us as parents. We all have parents, but not all of us are parents. And I've talked about the future of learning last week already, so I'm just going to try to add a little bit of new information here. So we've talked last time how exposure to technology, exposure to screens can change the development of young brains, right? This is sort of an affirmation of that. I love this quote on the right-hand side. Reading caused our brains to become imaginative. The internet is teaching our brain to scan information rapidly and efficiently. It's a different skill, but it may be a skill that is just as critical in the world of tomorrow as creativity is in the world of today. On a more practical side, if you are wondering, what should I do? What could I do? Last week was maybe a little bit scary, and oh my God, you could really ruin your child's brain if you let them view the screen too much. So how do you do it better? Here are some resources that you can utilize to get guidance, get examples of what is good, responsible use of screen time and technology with children. We've talked about the classroom of the future, learning of the future. What they're finding is that one of the key enablers of technology is, instead of moving all children at the same pace, which rarely works for everyone, because the fast-paced children, they kind of are bored, and some children are still left behind, even if you try to adapt it. Technology allows children to be together, yet learn at their own pace. And there are significant advantages to that self-paced classroom from a learning, retention, motivation, and also from an assessment perspective for the teachers. Well, so cognitive skills are one thing, but what about social skills? If our children are interacting mostly with the screen and with technology apps, where and when are they going to learn social skills such as confidence, cooperation, curiosity, communication? So one of the things that COVID took away from our kids, even if they could still do the virtual learning, was that social experience. It's a lost year, and they were so eager to go back and play with their friends across the street. It's unbelievable. But even for the development of social skills, there is an app. Ron Lemons, who's actually an entrepreneur in our region here, developed this app, The Third Element. And it is designed for student athletes, and it's not teaching them better sports skills. It's actually teaching them social skills. So it's a little app, and a lot of teams are embracing this because what they don't want is the scandal with their quarterback where they said something inappropriate and now they can't be on the team anymore, or they did something inappropriate and so forth. So this is an app that student athletes, but frankly anyone, could utilize to improve their social skills. And based on what Ron had shared with me, the coaches love it, the schools are embracing it, and so he seems to really have hit a core market there. Broader picture, I showed you earlier some resources about screen time, but if you're sort of wondering, does what I learned from my parents still work? Can I raise my kids in the same way? Here are some good resources. And again, I pulled out one key quote. The more walls we build, the more we are just creating little hackers who are just trying to get around the fence. That's a debate I often have with my wife, where she's more rigorous on the restrictions, and then the kids show amazing resourcefulness on borrowing devices from their friends or finding some other form of accessing technology. Here's something more screen-wise, a realistic perspective on how to be thoughtful with kids in the digital age. So you'll get these documents. This is more resources for the longer-term approach. So again, my summary for you, it's really important that you have a technology usage agenda. I catch myself sometimes, I need to get ready for a presentation. The kids are at home. They're like, oh, can we watch TV? And I'm like, yeah, just go watch TV so you don't bother me. But that's not the right way to go about it. I should really set some limits to say how much screen time per day is enough. Or, let's offset that. If you want to watch TV, earn it by being out and playing soccer or riding your bike for an hour. Earn your access to technology through social interactions, et cetera, et cetera. Also, become familiar with the teaching philosophy in your school. Is it suited for your child? Do they have self-paced learning? Do they have hybrid learning formats, virtual learning options? What best fits your child's needs? And then, I've shown you a lot of resources. What are the trade-offs in your parenting decisions? On the one hand, I don't believe you can hold your children back and sort of isolate them from technology forever. They need to learn, and their brains, as I've mentioned many times, may need to evolve for different requirements than our brains did. But these are very difficult, very complex parenting choices, and everybody needs to make those for themselves. Any questions or comments on those first two chapters, technology and the view of ourselves, and then the family dynamics?
Yeah, Oliver, I was wondering. I was wondering about if all this technology is going to lead people to read books less and less.
Well, I think UWGB just made a big decision or received a huge grant from the state to tear down the library, right? Because who needs 7 stories of books anymore? And you're going to have a beautiful new technology center or innovation center or something like that, right? So I think the reality is that the interaction with printed knowledge is going to be reduced more and more. we're going to have maybe digital forms of access to that knowledge. We're going to have access to summarized versions. Why do I need to read War and Peace and it's going to take me 2 weeks to muscle my way through it? I could actually get the Reader's Digest version, and read that in 10 minutes and pass most of the quizzes related to the book, right? So there is going to be still a romantic notion among all of us who remember books and who grew up with books. But for our children, that's not going to be the case anymore, right? It's like, who really misses the silent movies nowadays, right? Not many people do.
Oliver, to follow up on that, through education, they've been talking to us for years, saying that different students learn in different ways. So maybe in addition to reading, perhaps the visual and the tactile and everything else can kind of come together in more engaged various students.
Absolutely. If you go into a Montessori school, right, they basically live that philosophy that touching things, experiencing things, smelling things, being out in nature and experiencing things is just a completely different quality of learning than just the cognitive, visual, engagement with the subject. So what if, in fact, we could run diagnostics on our kids and figure out not only what is the required pace of learning, but what is also the best mix of modalities for our children? And here again, technology can play an important role. There's an example of a nature kindergarten where they have the kids out in the woods every single day, even in cold and rainy weather. But they have iPads out there with them. And if the kids discover something that they don't know, a new type of mushroom that they've never seen before because the temperature and weather were never suited, they can take a picture of it. And then the expert system that is embedded on the iPad will tell them about that mushroom, and they make that part of the learning experience for everyone that day, right? So there's many opportunities, and the danger would be just to say we're going to now squeeze everyone in a technology fast track, because that's not going to be the right answer for every child. Any other questions? All right, let's look at social connectivity and love. So what's it going to do? What is technology going to do to the wonderful process of meeting the right person or not meeting the right person and then living with the consequences? So again, online dating, online matchmaking is obviously a big deal. I met my wife on an online site, and that was many, many years ago before it was mainstream. And what is really surprising is not only how the science has advanced, chemistry.com and match.com, they're trying to put a lot of science into this so that you don't just fall for the picture, but also how specific you can be. There's Christian mingle, gluten-free singles, right? You can certainly find based on your preferences. Are you looking for long-term? Are you looking for one night? Or, people have so many choices now out there that the principal ability to find someone or to learn about the existence of someone has gone up dramatically. Now, if you look at what that does, right, flirting has become increasingly virtual because by the time you get to your first meeting, it is a while. All the first interactions are now technology supported, which means you're going to have to learn how to entice someone through digital means, right? There's a widening pool of options. You can get in touch constantly, right? It's not like in the old days where you have to wait for the letter to come back 2 weeks later. But there's also downside. There's harassment. It has become a bit of a game almost. Social media is becoming a source of jealousy. You know, people are seeing what their spouses or potential spouses are doing. You can know everything about anyone, and people are breaking up with text messages, right? So technology is playing a role along the entire life cycle of relationships, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the worse. So I took the liberty to analyze sort of at least the upcycle, right? If you take the traditional route, you meet, you approach a person, maybe then you ask them out to dinner, you fall in love, you move in with each other, you commit, and ultimately you share your finances. So let's take a look in each of these phases how technology influences that. So today, a lot of people maintain this portfolio of relationships in various stages. You know, they're not speaking to one person on Match.com. They're maybe, you know, they have liked the profiles of 20. They're talking to 10 of them. They're in serious conversations with 5. And maybe when they find the right person, maybe they discontinue that entire portfolio, or maybe for a while they keep it alive in the back pocket. And that makes then the route to commitment almost like a filtering process, as opposed to in the old days, you know, this is the bride that your parents have chosen for you. Boom, say yes or no. Now it's like, okay, this one is out because of that. This one is out because of that. And you can actually use a lot of information sources. You can go to Truth Finder to learn everything about the history of that person. You can look at their social media profiles to see who else are they interacting with, what are they up to. So there's an incredible amount of information that historically was never available if you choose to pursue that. Then, of course, comes the big moment of truth, right? At some point, you're going to meet in real life, and will what you experience in the virtual world now be confirmed, or is it going to be a big letdown because the technology allowed them to portray themselves as more than they really are, or maybe it allowed us to set expectations that were unrealistic. Now, the consequences of early failure, you know, the first dates going terribly wrong, are somewhat buffered because there is that portfolio of people you have in the pipeline. So what does that now do to level of commitment, to the likelihood of engaging in serious relationships earlier on? Now, when you're moving in with each other, there's a big decision to be made. Maybe one of you is an Apple follower and the other one is a Google Android follower. Oh my goodness, you know, what technology platform are we going to choose? Are we going to go with, you know, what smart TV are we going to have? Is it going to be compatible with Apple, with Google, or with both? Are we going to make purchasing decisions on Amazon or on eBay? These are new decisions. It's not just making room for both toothbrushes in the bathroom. Now we have to sort of consolidate our technology platforms or decide to let them coexist for a while. And then comes the data question, right? In the past, it was, you know, when are we going to have a shared bank account? Now it is, do you get to see my text messages? Do you have the password to my email? How much transparency can we and should we agree to? What are the boundaries of privacy? So again, technology is raising a new challenge here. There's a new frontier of sharing when it comes to living together in a committed union. Now, what if the person, the thing that we fall in love with is not even human, right? The movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix illustrated that. And in that movie, it was just a personality, right? She didn't have a body, a face, or anything like that. But he fell in love so much with the personality of his digital assistant. You know, you can configure that personality, the voice, the accent, the knowledge base you want that AI to maybe have access to. And maybe it is programmed to be very charming and very affirming, or maybe very dominating. Whatever you like, you can make it, you can adjust it to just the right mixture. And how could any human with natural and maybe even lovable flaws compete with that if you can create the perfect thing through configuration? And what if it could then even have a appearance like a real human. I've shown this a couple of times. Samsung's artificial humans, right? Computer-generated images, and obviously they can be configured to look like anyone. If you have a clear image of what your dream person looks like, well, it could be created with the right amount of resources, and then you can still go through the configuration process. It makes the question even more relevant. How could any real human still compete with that? Or if such an alternate companion choice exists, what does that mean? Does living with a real human become a compromise rather than a fulfillment of a dream? There are some people who say that forming romantic and sexual relationships with robots will be widespread by 2050. The question then is, will it also be accepted, right? There are some people who have sex dolls today, and society usually frowns upon that as sort of some kind of deviant behavior. But what if that sex doll was a robot that can talk, has a personality, and it's not just male to female, it goes with both genders nowadays? Will we become accepting of someone choosing a non-human companion? There are two sides to the argument. If we allow that, it could lead to the atrophy of social skills. We can't even form any lasting relationships anymore unless we can configure them. There will be fewer marriages, fewer partnerships, fewer children. Mankind will essentially wipe itself out. Maybe our planet could actually use a little less human growth, but there are risks. There are dangers to this sustainability of population levels in societies that really adopt that. Japan, I think, is on the forefront of that. Some people make a different argument. They could say, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. These relationships could maybe become part of a marriage. They could help overcome sexual frustrations. We could have higher quality marriages because the burden of fulfilling all of my needs is no longer on my partner. And there could be also fewer constraints on who to marry, right? So we've seen a movement towards more acceptance, at least in parts of our society, that is not universally shared. This LGBTQ acronym is getting longer and longer every year. So maybe we'll be adding V for virtual, R for robotic, or S for symbiotic at some point. The trend is clearly going in that direction as technology is achieving more human-like qualities, both from a materials perspective, from a capabilities perspective, from a personality perspective, and from a cognitive perspective. So here are, again, some key considerations. How you feel and think about that is going to differ greatly about where you are in your life. If you are in a committed relationship, maybe this all goes by you. It may not matter anymore. Or will it? Could this impact existing relationships? Are they at risk? Or will all of this have a stabilizing influence? And how will you react to others? There's always these stories of parents struggling with the acceptance of a child that comes out, with having maybe a gender identity thing. And so what if your children tell you, I'm falling in love with a robot, or I'm falling in love with an AI? If you know that one of your friends is dating a non-human companion, and when will these exceptions become acceptable? When will they become norms, if ever? Should they ever become norms? Or is this a boundary where we say, we've got to hold firm? We cannot allow that because, then there's no more going back to what we've considered natural human relationships. But again, the definition of that has evolved so much over the last years already. Any questions on this chapter of social connectivity and love, or comments?
The one comment I would make is kind of an interesting one. You mentioned that you met your wife online, through a dating app. And with the proliferation of dating apps and various options, it kind of goes back to that question: is there an actual commitment, or do people then begin to think that, well, if this isn't working out, I can always go to the next best thing?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's that portfolio approach, right? It's so easy to, at least on the early stages of the process, replace A with B, B with C, C with D. I think the struggle for everyone is going to say, no matter if you choose A, B, C, or D, the process of turning an acquaintance into a committed relationship still requires a lot and ongoing work. But if it is easier, and if the consequences of failure are buffered, as I mentioned earlier, maybe the likelihood of people doing that gets higher. Any other thoughts? All right, so let me go to my thought-provoking final chapter, as always. So AI and spirituality. There is a story in sort of in the Jewish faith realm, and I don't know a whole lot about it, but I read about it today, that a group of rabbis essentially created golems. They formed them from mud and then through incantations brought them to life. And these golems were basically trained to perform simple tasks. They were trained not to harm their masters, right? It almost sounds like robots or AI, what we've discussed, the laws of robotics. And for the most part, this went fine, but one of them turned on their masters, crushed him to death, and so forth. Because at the end of the day, the process of creation conducted by humans had one fundamental flaw. The creation did not have a soul, right? AI does not have a mind of its own, at least not yet, and it does not have a spirituality. So this sort of raises a couple of interesting questions. For one, is the emergence of AI, of a maybe at some point super intelligent entity, is that a threat to our faith-based traditions and values? Or on the flip side, do we maybe have to inject some level of spirituality into the AI to ultimately make it more human-like? Does the AI have to sort of fear or love the creator, or understand the love of the creator, right? These are spiritual questions. Also, could spiritual organizations use AI for good? I was teaching an MBA course at St. Norbert College called Waves of Disruption, and I had two pastors in my class, and every participant had to conduct or at least conceive of a project for how they would use technology, how they would create an innovation. And these guys came up with some really interesting ideas. They have a spiritual help hotline, and their church was growing so fast, sometimes it was really difficult to get to people in time. So if you have a spiritual crisis and you try to call someone and you're on hold for 30 minutes, well, that might not exactly help. Or if you then get someone, but they are a well-intended volunteer, but they don't really have the spiritual training to help you with your particular issue. So they thought about, what if there was an expert system that knows spiritual problems and questions and could guide the volunteers on the line to, formulating better responses, guiding people to the right resources. And then ultimately, they wanted to develop sort of a biblical expert systems for questions about God. All the words in the Bible are already documented. There are resources, but many of them are also paper-based. And, what if you could, if you say you have a question that says, what does the Bible say about children, right? Boom. Right? Ask the AI, ask this technological expert system, and it gives you all the examples, and maybe it interacts with you and guides you to answers to your question. So there could be uses of AI for good, as Stephen Hawking encouraged all of us to look for, rather than AI just having to be a threat. But then it could also go completely the other way. In 2015, this Anthony Lewandowski created the first Church of AI. He was a former Google engineer, and who knows what his real intentions were with this thing. Was it a scam? Was it a real thing? But there were some followers. Now, they didn't have a building. They didn't have actual meetings. It was more sort of a shared belief that AI is going to evolve into a superhuman, super intelligent being, and that we're going to have to prepare ourselves for peaceful coexistence with these non-biological life forms, right? That was the emphasis. That thing has now shut down. He was embroiled in lots of scandals, not related to this church, but regarding autonomous vehicles. At one point, he worked for Uber, then he went to Google, or the other way around. So lots of issues surrounding this individual. But the point is, essentially, people embraced the idea of AI as a new category of God-like entities, right? And that is just prospectively. We don't have a super intelligent AI yet, but what if it rises to that level? And what if it achieves cognitive superiority to us humans? And what if some of us bow to that superiority and admire it? And just even thinking that through raises the hairs in the back of my neck, but it's not that far-fetched, right? Will we dance around the AI like the golden calf? So these are some questions to which I don't have answers, but these questions are on the horizon, and we're going to have to ultimately define how AI fits into our relationship with God, how it fits into our spirituality. Does anybody have thoughts on that final topic?
Oliver, to me, it sounds a lot like the debate that has gone on historically between science and religion.
Mm-hmm.
The question about creation versus Big Bang. The scientific investigation seems to lend one way, as opposed to the teachings from a religious perspective, no matter what religion or foundations they come from. The Bible was written by men, for men, over centuries, and it's a compilation of folklore, compilation of stories over hundreds of years. So the development of AI is going to be very interesting to see how long that super intelligent being takes to develop, or if it even does develop. And then we look at it, well, this is something that man created. So where does that elevate man? Those are some of the questions floating through my head.
Right. And we could well have a fragmented society. If you think about the Mennonites or the Amish, how they basically decoupled themselves from society, interacting where it is necessary for them. But they've rejected technology. And sometimes I joke, maybe they had it right all along. And then we're going to have maybe a part of society that embraces technology in a utilitarian way. And we may have another extreme of society that really elevates technology to the all-encompassing purpose. We'll have to find out how this goes. Any other thoughts or comments? All right, well, this takes us to the very end of our summer series, Technology in Context. I hope you enjoyed this series. I hope you enjoyed learning about technology and then looking at the many, many angles in which technology impacts our lives. All of these sessions, except the one last week, have been recorded. The materials are available. Feel free to reach out to Catherine Martin, talk to others about these issues. We did not create this just for the live sessions, but we, from the beginning, planned to create an inventory of discussion topics that can be shared with others as well. I thank you for your loyal attendance. Many of you were in every single session. I really appreciate that. And I hope you get to enjoy the rest of the summer. Maybe some of these thoughts influence your thinking, your life, and your teaching in the future. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Okay.
Oliver?